Professor, and I'm going to teach you about Unit 12 Adjective clauses. Adjective clauses are usually independent, which used to describe a noun. For example, the car which was red belongs to Justin. Next, adjective is used to modify nouns and pronouns. For example, they live in a beautiful house is a kind of adjective, but tropical fruits are tasty fruits, dogs are loyal animals. So the one in brackets are all the adjectives. Next is the clauses, which relate the subject to the verb. For example, the lazy students whine. So the students is the subject and whine is the verb. The same goes to my dog loves pizza because dog is the subject and pizza is the verb. Next is the independent clause, which is the clauses that can stand alone. For example, Bob didn't mean to do it, but he did it anyway. So Bob didn't mean to do it can stand alone, and he did it anyway can also stand alone. Next, we can do relative pronouns and subjects where we use pronouns to describe the subject. For example, the man that talked to us was very friendly. We are referring to the man that talked to us. The next example is do you know the man who talks, which is referring to the before the who, which is the subject of man. Next is using the relative pronouns as subject. We can see the examples where we use who, whom, or that in terms of different situations to show the verb and going on. Next is the example of whom and who, where whom is used between two subjects, which is the David and I in the three example sentences. In the next sentence, recently, whom I met yesterday is mine. Refers to the interaction between Mr. Lee and I, and Mr. Lee, who is my friend's father, refers to Mr. Lee. Examples of which and that, where if removing the word that follow we could change the meaning of the sentence, is using the which is fine. From the example 2, you can see that if that is removed, it sounds weird. So example 1, we use which is have a comma before it.
Created using Powtoon.
Now I'm going to explain how to use whose as part of an adjective clause. All of the possessive adjectives such as his, her, its, and their can be replaced with adjective clause whose. It must use with a noun. For example, we want to describe a things or a people which belong to something or someone. Ken is the man. We met his wife. In this situation, his means Ken's. To combine these sentences, you can simply remove the his and replace it with whose. Ken is the man whose wife we met. From the sentence, whose wife we met is the adjective clause that describes Ken. So we know that there is a relationship between Ken and wife. With the word his, we know that the wife is belong to Ken. So we can just use whose to replace his. Let's have another example using whose to modify things. I love a closed door. Its selection is the biggest in town. With the word its, we know that there is a relationship between closed door and selection. To replace the possessive adjective its, we use whose to describe the selection is related to the closed door. So, the sentence should be I love a closed door whose selection is the biggest in town. However, the word whose cannot be omitted. For example, Harvey, whose house we are renting, is a lawyer. We cannot omit the word whose from this sentence. If we omitted the word whose, the sentence should be Harvey, house we are renting, is a lawyer. Without the word whose, the sentence do not show any relationship between Harvey and the house, and we will not get the information about the house it belongs to Harvey.
Created using Powtoon.
Now we are going to look at where in adjective clause. Normally we use where to modify a noun of place by replace the word there in a sentence. For example, this is the restaurant, we ate there. Since we knew that there represents a place, so we can replace it with where. This is the restaurant where we ate. However, we can only use where if we can restate the location with there. For example, the sentence, Tokyo is the town where I was born. When we replace the word where with there, the sentence becomes Tokyo is the town. I was born there. In this way, where can be used to replace there. Not every sentence can replace there with where. For example, New York is a city where has beautiful scenery. The word where cannot be used because the word there cannot be restated in this sentence. Instead, the word that is used to describe New York City. Where can be replaced by which or that with a preposition. Next, we use when or that to begin an adjective clause that modify a noun of time. They can be omitted without changing the meaning of the sentence.
Using Powtoon.
Now we are going to look at adjective clauses that identify and adjective clauses that do not identify. An adjective clause that distinguishes one person or thing from another is called identifying or essential. The clause is not enclosed in commas. An adjective clause that adds extra information but does not distinguish one person or thing from another is called non-identifying or non-essential. The clause is enclosed in commas.
Created using Powtoon.
We will begin with adjective clause that do not require commas. Here's an example. The woman who is wearing the red dress is my piano teacher. The underlined portion of this sentence is the adjective clause. To explain why we don't use commas in this adjective clause, let's look at what happens if we remove the adjective clause from the sentence. We'll get the woman is my piano teacher. When we hear this sentence, we will get the expression of what woman? Who? There might be many women in the room. How do I know which one we are talking about? Adjective clause helps us to identify which woman we are talking about. Because we do not use commas with this adjective clause, we call it an essential adjective clause, because it identifies which woman we are talking about.
Created using Powtoon.
The other possibilities is the adjective clause that does requires commas. Here's an example. Mia's dog which she got when she was 6 needs an operation. The adjective clause here is which she got when she was 6. We use commas in this adjective clause is because when we remove the adjective clause from the sentence, we get Mia's dog needs an operation. That still makes sense and gives us useful information. This sentence does not need adjective clause in order to work. If we don't need this adjective clause in order for the sentence to make sense, then we call it a non-essential adjective clause. The adjective clause does not identify what we are talking about. We don't ask which Mia. We already know what or who we are talking about. Some sentences have exactly same word, but one uses commas and the other does not use commas. Commas in an adjective clause can change the meaning of the sentence. My sister, who lives in Singapore, is a school teacher. My sister who lives in Singapore is a school teacher. The two sentences use the exact same words, but the commas tells us some very interesting information. In the first sentence, it seems like I have only one sister. That's because the commas tells us, hey, this is extra information. Means there is no need to specify which sister I'm talking about. So logically, I must have one sister. The second sentence has no commas, so it identifies which sister I'm talking about. This implies that I have more than one sister. That way, we know that we are talking about my sister who lives in Singapore and not my sister who lives in Malaysia.
Created using Powtoon.